You have a whole fan base here. You know that?
That's weird to me, but thank you. Just it happened fast, you know. I just spoke my mind and oh, hey people, you know.
It it is it's wild. Like you showed up and then all of a sudden you're just like, whew, everywhere. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. You know what it is? You know what it is? It's the attitude. You bring some extra spice to it. We're here for it.
Well, we need the spice. Have you seen what's going on? It's a train wreck.
Train wrecks. No, train wrecks you can walk away from. This is far worse.
This is like, yeah, it's terrible.
So, since you're kind of new to the world here, tell us about yourself.
Okay, so obviously, you know, I'm Matt. I'm a trans man from England living in America because I married an amazing American girl. And I am horrified at this evident attack on children. And so I've kind of, even though I was quite an anxious person before about even doing a live to two friends, I was like, nah, this is bigger than me now. This is the children. Like, we all need to be doing this.
And out of curiosity, because I have a couple of friends over in the UK who kind of tell me what's going on over there. Is it the same energy as far as
People
like the
in
push?
people in yeah, I mean it's still happening, but honestly, people in the UK are it's really worrying. In fact, I was just watching the public protection Wales stuff of the stuff that's being taken into the school, and I was in tears watching it because it's absolutely horrific what is being showed to children. And I actually recommend that every parent demands from their school board what their children are being shown, because the thing, you know, they were showing 20% of women like anal sex and showing a banana dipped in chocolate spread, and that's being shown to under 6 year olds.
Yep. And they've also removed the rights for parents to intervene.
Yes, it's horrific. I actually got sent by a follower a Facebook conversation that parents had had with a teacher, okay? And they were all messaging the teacher saying, I don't want you talking to our kids about LGBTQ stuff like this. We're really worried about what you're teaching. And her response was, it's up to your children what we teach them, not you. That's the attitude that is being given. These teachers are so woke that they will go behind parents' backs. I mean, there was a school in America. I can't remember what state it was in, but the doctor, the school nurse, actually admitted that she was keeping it quiet that children were on puberty blockers. This is illegal. This should have people behind bars.
It's it's such a tough conversation because people have this ideology, like everyone has the right solution for kids, but people have conflicting ideologies around what right is, right?
Hmm.
um do you know any parents of trans kids?
Uh, no, I don't. Not really young ones, but I've had a lot reach out to me. And honestly, the thing that I'm hearing the most is these parents don't know if their children really are trans because they're changing their mind like the weather right now.
Yep.
I had one parent message me saying that her two children approached her and said that they were trans, and when she asked them what that meant, they didn't know.
Yeah, I led support groups for parents of trans kids for a while, and it was a really tough place for me to operate because the space was for parents to have support with each other, right? Valid. They have kids who are going through some stuff and they're scared parents. But it was really tough to when I tried to challenge some of the conversations, like, hey, so like have you asked your kids maybe the journey of how they got there? And they go, no, they don't really talk to me, they're really introverted. And they wouldn't challenge that at all. And then when I did, things got a little heated. So they're scared parents are scared parents, and they're going to follow doctors' orders, right? And we could
Yes.
easily say that a large when someone goes to the medical industry, they're going to go, you feel kind of uncomfortable all the time. Yeah, gender, like it is recommended really fast in the conversation, and then it's a very fast spiral. It was in my experience. Was it for you? Like, when you started your identity questioning, did you find a lot of resistance from medical industry, or was it a visit and then prescriptions?
Yeah, it was pretty fast actually. So the I waited obviously till I was a bit older, but when I did go, I was sat down. There was no real psychiatric evaluation. It was literally, do you want to be a boy? Yeah. And then it was, do you know what the side effects will be once you start testosterone? And obviously, I would have researched that. I knew that it would cause maybe adult acne and things like that. But that was all they really cared about. They didn't at all like do any actual psychiatric evaluation. So it's kind of worrying because anyone could literally walk into these places and say, I think I'm this gender, and they'll pretty much just send you on your way. You have a waiting list. There is a long waiting list, don't get me wrong, but nothing really changes in that. I mean, the first appointment, they obviously tell you to live as your preferred gender for a year, but I find that actually quite deceiving because you're not on hormones at that point, so you actually have no idea really what it's like to be in that gender. Because you can wear the clothes, you can cut your hair and stuff, but the emotions I felt when I started testosterone, I was not prepared for any of that. Testosterone's a very strong hormone. It really does impact how you feel. And I was not given any of this warning. And one thing that I did find is before I started testosterone was if I got upset about something, the normal reaction when I was a female was you'd get teary, But when I started testosterone, you feel angry more than you rush to cry. So I was feeling all of these emotions that I couldn't handle. I've never been a violent person. I'm a softie, but I was feeling emotions where I normally would have been like, ugh. I was punching my pillow and I was stressed and I thought something was wrong with me. And my friends were saying to me stuff like, Matt, why are you reacting like this to stuff? And I didn't know, and they did not prepare me for any of that. I went through that year when I first started testosterone, same personality, but not understanding myself because my emotions were a roller coaster. I don't know what it's like the other way round, being put on estrogen, but on testosterone, roller coaster.
So, the first time I heard a trans man describe testosterone, going on testosterone, blew my world. Because my first trans support group was all trans women, and then a trans man eventually showed up. And the trans women conversation in an echo chamber, that's easy. Then the trans man shows up and we're like, yeah, so what were your struggles? And they're like, it was like second puberty and I was like just excited. You know what I mean? Excited. Obnoxious amount of time. And when I went on when I went on T blockers and estrogen, right? Because it's both at the same time. It's I struggle wording this because when I went off of them, I felt the same thing, which tells me that it's a placebo effect. But when I went on them, right, I felt lighter, felt, all these new emotions and stuff. And I cried a lot. And obviously it was because my system was just kind of struggling with that change. And then I had headaches for a long time. Once I started losing body mass and things like that, because it changes the muscle distribution a little bit, that's when I started getting happy, but it was happy because I fit in female clothes. It wasn't necessarily an actual feeling of euphoria. And then going off hormones, I get to go through testosterone again.
Wow, that must be an intense feeling. Very intense.
After 3 years of the other stuff, I'm like, I don't miss it, but I do. But again, I don't feel like I'm losing anything, and I think it's really important that's part of it. It's why I struggle with detransitioners being silenced, because you'll talk to trans people who go on hormones and they go, I feel how I should have always been. This is the happiest I've ever been. Oh my goodness, this is what I needed. I am now balanced when I was no longer balanced. But I genuinely think a large chunk of that is a placebo effect. It's a mind over matter thing. I'm getting
Yes.
what I wanted, and that's what's making me happy. It has nothing to do with the hormones. Now, the reason people take hormones is to get physical changes,
Yes.
so when they look in the mirror or when other people look at them, they pass, right, as that gender.
Absolutely. Hmm.
So, what are your thoughts on that being the solution around being dysphoric or alienated in your body?
I mean, I did have the experience, like you were saying, where it did level out for me eventually, and I did start feeling better. But I can remember before I started testosterone, I was so determined to see these changes. I would find myself on YouTube 3 months on T, 6 months on T, 1 year on T videos, okay? And I remember when I first started T, I had my first shot and I walked out of there like, yeah! And, you know, and then I found what's really strange is where I used to keep checking for these signs, once they happened with me, I stopped. I didn't even think about not looking anymore. I obviously must have started feeling more comfortable in myself. But when surgery and that came about, I actually had depression at first. Even though I'd waited so long for this surgery, I knew, I felt like I was a boy since I was 5 years old. Okay, so that I'd wanted that like my whole teenage years, start of adulthood. I was waiting. I want my chest removed. I want my chest removed, because the way it was for me is, even when I started testosterone, I would feel okay about myself till I went to have a bath or a shower and I saw my chest and I could see my body, and that's when I really had gender dysphoria, because my facial hair and everything was not matching up with this. But then I had the surgery, and I know other people have been through like anesthetic and stuff before. I'd never been put to sleep before. I'd never had any surgery before. So the first time I had surgery, it was major. And I had complications, and people don't talk about them enough either. My surgery, even though I didn't lose my nipple in the end, I'm not happy with it. My nipples look messed up. One of them looks like a Tetris piece, okay? Like, I can't explain, like, the graft did not go good. I've got the one that actually I nearly lost turned out looking better than the one that had no complications. And I had my surgery and I was so hopeful to be able to go swimming without a t-shirt and all of this stuff, and instead I'm more ashamed now because my chest looks wrong. I have ugly scars, I have weird shaped nipples. Like, this isn't as great as people are making it out to be. It is traumatic, and the healing process is really horrible. It's not fun.
And so I didn't do surgery, but like I watched a lot of videos to understand whether I wanted to, right? And once I was finally able to stop passing out from watching the videos, because 16 feet of gauze inside of you, that's not, no sir. But it's the after stuff, right? And there's still maintenance and there's still realities there. So with trans women, right, you can get the surgery, but you still have to maintain, as in you have to
Yes.
add lubrication and you have to dilate in order for it to not change back or push itself
Right.
out or whatever. And I'm sitting there asking myself, like, okay, so if the idea is to have a body part, and that body part requires a whole bunch of making it that body part over and over again, I feel like I would just be constantly reminded that it's not the body part it is.
Yes.
And that's not what they tell kids. That's not what they tell parents. Like, parents go, yep, nope, that, we're gonna do all these things and they're gonna have the body part they want. I'm like, they may have the body part they want, but they're not gonna have the outcome that's in their head.
No, they're not, because I've recently found out something that's quite shocking to me. Now, I was never interested in the metioplasty or the phalloplasty because it's not very successful in female to males. A lot of the time, you end up with the horrible pump like men with erectile dysfunction. So it had a very slim success rate. I thought the other way round. Male to female was better, but I've actually heard a lot of trans women now say that again they actually build over what's there, and a lot of them are left with this cosmetic vagina that they can't even have sex with because it hurts and there's a block, so they're left without anything, and it's affected them in their adult life with their intimacy. And there was a far left trans woman who actually stuck up for this other trans woman, because all the far left ones were saying she was a liar, saying that it's fine, and this liberal trans woman turned around and said, why are you calling her a liar? Because I've got it too. What are you on about? Like, this does happen. And that really did surprise me, because I honestly thought the complications were a little less on the other way round, but it seems like the risks are pretty much equal both ways.
Well, they really are, and it depends on the surgeon, right? And there's more and more surgeons becoming eligible to do it. And I seriously question that. The first couple that were recommended to me by doctors, because I knew where the good ones were.
Yes.
And I would go to like my just regular hormone doctor, and they'd be like, yeah, we got this one with our hospital. I'm like, cool. Do they have any like photos? They're like, no. I'm like they don't take pictures of their work? They're like, no. I'm like, well, like this, you're not winning me over here, man. And then I would talk to other trans people who went to those doctors, and they'd have UTI infections. They would have serious issues. And again, that goes back to, does that lead to buyer's remorse? And buyer's remorse with that type of stuff is far worse, especially if you do some healing. What I'm mostly worried about around the kids conversation, and I'm gonna use vaccines as the example. So as a parent, I have 2 kids. I had them before I transitioned. And as a parent, you know, the doctors tell you, here's a vaccine schedule. You got to do it. Everyone does it. Here's why you do it. And it all makes sense. And as a scared parent with no experience, you go and do those things. And for a chunk of the population, there's issues. My kid got a vaccine injury. And it was a really hard thing to go through. And as a parent, I have to live with that, right? So did I do anything wrong? I listened to a doctor. The doctor used statistics that they were fed, whether they're reliable or not, who knows. 10 years in the medical freedom community, I can argue them now. I couldn't before. I didn't know any better. And now I have to have this conversation with my kid of just like, I'm sorry. Like, that's it. I'm sorry, right? So I think about that type of guilt, but with parents who let their kids do this, and then maybe the kids work through whatever's going on, and they're older, and they go, why didn't you love me enough to tell me no? Right? Like that's a real thing that's going to happen.
A lot of resentment's going to come.
Yep, and these parents are going to go, but I supported you. And it's like, but I wasn't looking for support. I was looking for protection. Like, that's how I have resentment towards my mom for that type of stuff. She didn't protect me in the way that makes sense to be protected. She made it in what made sense for her, which was narcissistic tendencies. And I worry that there's going to be a generation of, and a very large number of people who are either going to have to stand up to their parents aren't going to be able to handle it, which is going to cause a whole bunch of just narcissistic defense. There's going to be a bunch of kids who are going to do the healing, and they're going to have buyer's remorse hard, and it's going to affect their mental health. Or neurologically, there's going to be a significant spike in major neurodivergent issues.
Yeah.
And again, all parents can say is, well, I supported you. And what I get from parents all the time is, it's better than a dead kid.
Yes. The worrying thing right now...
I struggle.
The worrying thing as well right now is we're living in a world of a lot of virtue signalers. And I do worry, because I see some parents where... I'm seeing these videos, okay? I saw a video yesterday. This woman has 4 children who are either non-binary or trans, okay? And they're all under 10 years old. Now, when I see that, I feel like that's probably a parent who's trying to be progressive, because how can you have 4 under 10? And I mean, they were like wearing the trans flag and everything, and she was going around making them introduce themselves. And to me, that's a parent who's not thinking about her children. She's thinking, look at me, I'm so open-minded, I'm such a great parent, look what I'm letting my kids do, I'm letting them do this. And honestly, the children like that, when they grow up, if they end up regretting these decisions they've made, a lot of children are going to really dislike their parents when they're older if this is allowed to keep happening, because there is a lot of confusion right now with the way schools are being as well, where they're introducing all of this stuff. Children don't know what they want to be. When I was a kid, I wanted to be all sorts of things, like I wanted to be Batman, I wanted to be a unicorn. Like it happens. They have big imaginations. So if we live in a world where if our child comes up to us and says, I want to be a boy, and we take it literally every time, we're going to have a generation in the future of really confused adults.
And with a shit mental health industry, because
Yes.
who's the ones who started them down that trip, right? And I've talked to a lot of therapists about this across the board, and the general consensus is that it's hard for them to question it, because either the parents or the kids call it transphobic. Like, it's an immediate knee-jerk reaction, right? You don't believe me that I'm not the gender I feel. You're transphobic. Okay, they're doing their job, right? And so I ask these therapists who still pursue that path, knowing that that's a problem, and they go,
Yes.
a lot of insurance companies, if patients use certain terminologies and words, insurance companies have rules around that in order to get paid. Now who do we blame, right? And we all know insurance companies is literally the money pot for pharma and all that shit, right? I've seen therapists who advertise themselves as a gender-affirming therapist. And, I used to use that term until about a year ago, and I stopped calling it gender-affirming, because that's buying an outcome and not treating a disorder.
Yes.
You think?
Yeah, I agree with you, because we saw it as well with the push for the COVID vaccine. Like, these people are being paid to suggest all of these things. So they're not thinking, if someone goes in and they think, and then they say they think they're transgender, that person isn't going to be thinking, right, like, they're going to think, and that is where it is worrying. We've got to the point where people aren't necessarily focusing on people's healthcare anymore. They're all thinking about the money, and it's the same with everything. Follow the money. I say it to people all the time. Like, it's always the money, and it's a really horrible realization, but it's the truth.
It really is. And, I'm jaded, very jaded and biased, but the medical industry builds customers. It doesn't treat patients anymore.
Yes.
That's a reality.
It's sad.
Like,
it's true.
And the mental health industry has medicalized mental health issues. Now there's a range there, and this is gonna offend some people, but we've gotten so used to, I have this feeling and I need to make it better, and a therapist has an hour, a week to work through that with you, and in the meantime you're struggling, and so what's the option? Medicalization, right?
Yeah.
Getting a solution. And it's the same with this gender dysphoria versus digging into the root problem. What I learned after I transitioned and after I did a bunch of work on myself is that, my sense of feeling alienated in my body had a lot more to do with rejecting parts of my past due to trauma.
Okay.
Right? And that's where a lot of people are landing. It's just therapists don't dig there, because working through trauma is hard. And you can't do it in 45-minute sessions once a week, while also having the kid threaten that they're going to unalive themselves with a panicking parent and all these things. So there's this huge cycle of pressure that leads to the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance is medicalization and surgeries and hormones.
Yep. The mental health industry messed me up a lot as a teenager. I went to the doctor because I was depressed. Like, being a teenager can be hard. You're going through puberty. It's a lot. You've got your exams coming on in school. It's a stressful time. I went to the doctor and literally only told them that I was feeling down and I was a bit depressed. The first time they told me I had bipolar. Okay? So I go in there saying I'm down about stuff. I get told I've got bipolar. I go away. I get told to go to another appointment. I get told I've got borderline personality disorder. I'm thinking, wait, you told me I had bipolar, and now you're telling me I've got. But there's nothing really wrong with me. I'm just upset. You know, they love to just label you with these titles and put you on antidepressants, antipsychotics. Once I dealt with my traumas, like you were saying just now, like a lot of it is trauma based. Once I dealt with my traumas, I didn't have any issues anymore. It just went away. And then I was thinking, they lied to me. Because if it was a real thing, I'd still have it, right? They lied to me. Like, all it took was me dealing with my own trauma for it to all stop. But they were just so quick to prescribe me with these pills because they get paid for it. And this is why I worry about the mental health industry, because it can be helpful. There are people that need it, but when they're doing stuff like that, are they really your friend or are they your enemy? You know, if they're trying to make you think there's things wrong with you when there isn't, it's very concerning.
My therapist was a funny conversation. So I was with my therapist for the past 6 years, and she was with me back when I was still struggling with addiction, when I was depressed. I mean, when I went to her, I was broken. And then, you know, I worked through a lot of stuff over the next couple years, and then she went on maternity leave for like ever. It was like 6 months. In that 6 months is when I went through my journey to transition. Right. So she comes off maternity leave, and I'm like, hey, welcome. I'm Becca. I'm Rebecca. I'm this now. And she's like, what the hell? Like, she was really shocked, but she's a very left side therapist. Right. And so she was like, hey, like, I get it. I get it. And like, now that I think about like how she responded, I'm kind of like, nothing about how I was and what I turned into really lines up, but that's fine. I did it while she was on maternity leave. I won't hold her accountable for that. So I moved, and when I go to Minnesota, I see her. And so I went and saw her a couple months back. And I'm very different about that attitude now. I'm very just like, yeah, I've done a lot of healing. I've identified the trauma behind what I did. I've identified that I need to work on accepting who I was and really deal with that. And so, and she's like, yeah, and you're also like, you know, you're obviously presenting less feminine now. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm just kind of working on accepting all of my truths and not just the ones that make me happy. And that triggered her. She got like super defensive. And then she used to fight with me about the COVID vaccine before I left. And she actually like said some pretty weird things. For a therapist who I was paying, and I don't mean to demonize her by any means, but then I see her a few months back, and this conversation comes out, and I'm like, so what's new with you? And she's like, well, I had a vaccine injury, and she changed her tone about vaccines. She also changed her tone about trans conversations after I explained to her my journey around feeling alienated in my body, and she knew my past, and she goes, wow, that actually makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And then I asked her, so how do you feel about, like, you know, driving that conversation as a therapist? Like, do you find struggles with that? And she's like, listen, our board of directors, like, wants as many customers and wants to feel as inclusive as possible. And that was her canned answer. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of therapists. Like, you can point through this logic, you can use real lived experiences, but they're still going to stick to this, I got my hands tied, and this is the canned response.
This is the thing, though. There's ways to be inclusive without forcing these terrifying ideologies. You know, like I've had parents like say to me, like, how do I, you know, show my kid that I'm taking them seriously without like letting them go through this surgery right now? And I was like, let them express themselves. I'd never be someone, because the thing is, my mum, now as I got older, I was grateful for how she dealt with me. But at the time, I thought she was the meanest. You know, being a teenager, wanting to transition and having my mum say, you can't do this, you can't do that. I thought she was the wicked witch of the West, you know. I thought she was the meanest person ever. But when I got older and I went through the stuff myself, I was like, you know what, my mum was actually great because she let me express myself still. Like, even though she didn't let me start testosterone or anything young, which was the best thing to do, she let me cut my hair short, she let me wear football kits, she let me be a kid, she let me be me. So like, there's a way that we have to have an angle about this where you don't want to completely dismiss your child because they're going to think you're not a very nice person. You need to explain to them that you love them so much, and that is why you are saying these things, because you want them to be safe. And if it is what they want down the line, that's great. But another thing is as well, being a girl growing up, it isn't easy, because when you're a girl growing up, you get a lot of tomboys, because you know that you're going to have to go through periods, you're going to go through like getting bigger breasts and all this stuff, and it's like you see boys just kind of living their life and you think, I'm really jealous of that. So you get a lot of tomboys, and I've had so many women message me saying, when I was a little girl, I wore boys' clothes, I wanted to be a boy. I'm now married with 3 kids. And those people have said to me as well that they're glad they didn't grow up in this generation, because they probably would have ended up doing something they regretted, because we've got to a point now where if a boy wants to play with girls' toys or vice versa, you should change your whole identity, because you're obviously in the wrong body, and this is going to be so dangerous down the line. I mean, someone else messaged me, a girl came out in class, the teacher affirmed their pronouns and stuff. 1 month later, she's grown her hair back out, she's growing it back out, she wants to be a girl again. Like, we cannot be taking children literally when they say they're in the wrong body straight away. These kids really need to have time to find out who they are, because they don't know who they are at that age.
And if it's a sense of would you say that it's often trauma-based, and it's often rejection, a sense of rejection, as a motivation? And I challenged the parents in this group around this. I'm like, so if it's a sense of maybe not getting enough validation or attention or whatever, how do you feel about that, parents? And obviously they all got on the super defensive, because it potentially highlighted that there was some accountability involved, right? I think about what's the generation of parents right now. The generation of parents is people, born 80s, 90s, and it's the beginning of the internet generation, the look at me generation, and we kind of evolved with the idea of instant gratification and the digital citizenship stuff, right? So I think about, because I know that my trauma was validation trauma. Like, I was raised by a narcissist. Right. Nothing I ever did was good enough. Mm-hmm. And if you think about a generation of parents who are obsessed with their phones, obsessed with iPads, obsessed with like being loud online, obsessed with fighting with people online, and that's all they talk about with their kids, and their kids think that what kids will do is they will do what they think their parents want them to do in order to get what they need from a parent. And so when someone is super hyper focused on this thing, they're going to do things to cater to that. The kids will. Yeah. And I know from my experience leading that parent group that is a very sore subject. And then I circle back to, okay, 10, 15 years from now, a bunch of kids are going to do a bunch of work, and this is going to come back to you. Like, you can be pissed about it, but it's like, that's a real thing. And therapists won't point to the parents. Doctors won't point to the parents. And I'm not even necessarily trying to put blame on parents. There is a whole lot of things involved with what social media has done to us culturally. And we are in a cultural transition right now with that, and we're all trying to navigate that, and we can see that there's a lot of different outcomes in a lot of different ways. You can see that in a rise of narcissistic tendencies and things like that, right? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've lost it, carry on. It went from my brain, it'll come back.
Okay. Where I've really struggled is a lot of people saying this is child abuse.
Yes.
And I pause here. I really pause here, because one, scared parents are going to doctors, and doctors are having that conversation. Now, there may be parents who are doing it for the virtue signaling and instant gratification and all that shit. Maybe. No one's ever going to question that. But when we say it's child abuse, and I see a lot of conservatives throw that out there, when you label something child abuse, that implies and leads to Child Protective Services getting involved. And I will tell you that I was part of that system. I will tell you that I have met a stupid amount of people who are part of that system as kids. And that system is far more dangerous than any other system for kids. And so I struggle when they go, it's child abuse. Okay, well, that means Child Protective Services are going to get involved, and that means that kids are going to end up in a broken system where they're going to be trafficked. and I want to put a pause on that conversation with people who land there. There's a difference between child abuse and misguided, right?
There is. I agree with you because, like you said, like not all of these parents are doing it to virtue signal. Some just really want their child to be happy because they love their child. And the thing is, as well, the age range of parents, like the ones who say in their forties bracket, those parents also feel like they're learning things from their kids. You know, I remember when I used to come back from school and I'd tell my parents stuff and they'd be like, well, we didn't know that because the education system has completely changed. So how do we know that some of these parents aren't having their kid come home and they're being told all this stuff about this many genders and stuff and they're like, oh, that's new to me, okay, right, I better be more accepting, you know. That is the issue as well. There are parents who literally are just trying to do their best for their kid, but they are being misguided because these agendas that are being targeted at the kids don't have their best interests in heart. If anything, they are paedophile teaching because I saw earlier they want to teach, WHO wants to teach children how to pleasure themselves age 0 to 4. When has a child ever needed to learn masturbation? That is disgusting. That is paedophile stuff being put in, which is going to enable child abuse. That kind of stuff will, because it said that they will be taught that being touched is nice. Now, if they're taught that at age 4 and some adult then goes up to them and touches them, oh, they're doing this because they're being nice. No. It's opening up the door to grooming, and an argument I've seen is some people think it's going to prevent it. In what world does teaching children to pleasure themselves and have sex at a young age prevent child abuse?
All right.
It's insane.
Yeah, and my next little wave of what I'm focusing on is, a lot of books are hitting bookshelves, and parents don't realize what's there, and it's all hidden. It's all hidden under what seems rational. But then when you really look at how a child's lens would interpret it, it's scary stuff. So my kid brought me one from the library, and it really focused on celebrating trauma bonding, which was really weird. It was like written in a comic, and basically it was like, hey, I'm depressed, I found my other depressed friends, and like, look how much we like being with each other. But like, it never focused on like getting better. Like, it just focused on like, here's my group of other people. It's trauma bonding. And then there's a book that I am dying to get it. It comes out at the end of this month. And basically it talks about consent in a very specific way. So basically a kid is really uncomfortable, and it shows like a little girl and an old man, and then she's like, if you tell the adult that you're uncomfortable, they'll make it better. And then the next page is like her holding a popsicle with the old man rubbing her shoulders. Like, this is a real thing. And it's coming out at the end of this month, and it's going to end up on shelves. I am dying to get this book. And I may or may not have found out through my networking that that book, along with many other similar ones, are paid for by a grant, and that grant is run by, and I did a few videos on this, is run by an organization that is run by all of the elites who do all of the bad shit. Like, when you really trace the money, that same organization who's like promoting maps and all these things are paying for these books to go in libraries. Like, you can follow the trail.
Yeah, I saw
that's a thing.
Page from a book that's being handed out in schools right now for ages 6 to 11, okay? And it was telling them how to have anal sex and give oral. It actually gave instructions how to do these things. It was like, some people like to lick or suck the other, and I was thinking, why are you giving this to 6-year-olds? It's absolutely insanity. It is grooming, and any parent who sees their kid brings these books home and thinks that's okay, like, they're just as questionable, because it's always been a thing to learn sex education. But when I learned it in school, I was like 15, 16 years old, around the time when you can't stop it. Children, like teenagers, they end up exploring. Like, you can't prevent it, especially in the way the world is now. They've become desensitized younger and younger. Like, I had a friend open up to me. This is shocking, okay? So her niece is 11. her and her friends got pulled out of school because they were all having sex in the bathroom. 11-year-olds. And she was horrified that she found this out about her niece. And her niece didn't understand. And I reckon it's to do with the stuff they're learning. If these books are accessible, that's probably how they know about all this stuff at this point. But it's really sad. Her niece is really messed up. She's having to have counselling because she's been so sexualized.
Yeah, I've run into that parent group. One time I walked into the room kind of where the kids were, and I walked in and they're talking about furries. And I mean, this was like 15 to 10 years old, and I was like, what the like, even I don't talk about furries. Like, they were saying stuff that made me blush, and I'm like, oh my god. And the parents are just like, well, yeah, no, that's a thing, like their uncle or whatever the fuck. And I'm like, okay. There was a comment in here, and it's a comment that I see all the time. Trans ideology is grooming children. I want to pause again. I was groomed, and grooming is a very specific intent. Grooming is conditioning someone to be comfortable with sexual activity. I don't believe that the trans conversation is grooming. I think it's drug dealing, right? It's a different kind of unethical. But what are your thoughts when people say that trans ideology, like sexual orientation, and talking about that at a young age, that's grooming, but the trans stuff, I don't think it's grooming. It's drug dealing, but it's not grooming. What do you think?
The way I see it is, I don't think these topics need to necessarily be spoken about unless these thoughts are happening. The fact that they're being introduced to children without them even feeling that way is what's planting this confusion. So I think that's where they see it as, because, like, I thought that I was a boy at 5, but I thought that myself. My mum didn't turn around to me and go, did you know people are trans? You know what I mean? Like, by putting these things in children's heads, you're getting them thinking about things they may not have even thought about to start with. So it is grooming, in not in the way that, like, I would perceive it as in, like, sexual, like, paedophilia, but it's grooming in a sense where you are forcing children to think about topics that they have no business thinking about, especially if they haven't got that issue themselves. And, Disney saying they want to ramp up their LGBTQ content, again, that is putting stuff in the children's heads, because they're thinking, that those boys are kissing, so does that mean I should be kissing a boy? Let kids be kids. Just let them be children, and if they feel things, they can approach you and they can tell you how they're feeling. But it's the fact that they are having this stuff forced down their throats where they're having to think about it when they didn't need to, maybe before.
So I can meet you there, but I want to expand it. Were you attracted to girls as a kid?
I started having attraction when I was going through puberty, but when I was in school, even being gay then was still kind of taboo. And I left school in 2007, so when you think about it, it hasn't been a huge amount of time that things seem to have accelerated. So I did have a crush. My first ever crush was on a girl, but I did have boyfriends in school, but it didn't feel right to me because of how I felt inside. I never opened up about it though, so I was kind of the weird kid in school. I was bullied a lot because I was quiet. I was kind of living a lie, and I didn't really start having proper friends till I started college, because then I started being more comfortable in my skin. Even though I didn't start my transition yet, I did start wearing more boyish clothes, and I kind of was just being a bit more me in that way. But regarding school, no, it was still taboo back then. It was, even being a lesbian was rare. There was a girl actually who came out as lesbian when I was in school, and people were like, whereas now there's probably like several people in one year group. It's like it's changed a lot.
The reason I bring it up is, so with my experience, I started hitting on boys, and
right.
My last year of high school, our principal sat me down, put a Bible on this was public school, put a Bible on his desk and said, listen, if you are going to hit on boys, you're a sexual predator. And having been through the trauma I did as a kid growing up, that messed me up. And so I pushed all that shit down. And then I ended up being in hetero relationships for the next good while. And then I did a bunch of healing and realized, holy shit, I suppressed a lot, and I lived a really complicated life from a sexual attraction perspective. And the reason I bring these up, because the kids let kids be kids thing, totally.
Yeah.
But where I see a lot of people go is, it's hard being the default being one type of sexual orientation, hetero. That's the default, right? And there are a lot of kids who feel shame around that because they have these complex emotions and they see that the default is this, and so they build a lot of shame, and then they end up having either internalized homophobia or some other issue, right? And so the reason that the left pushes for more exposure is to, make these kids see that this isn't something that you need to be afraid of or ashamed of. And so that's the well intent idea behind it. Now, should it be taught? Nope. Should it be pushed down kids' throats? No. But should we be suppressing things to the point where it's like, no, 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 like there cannot be two husbands. Like we're not going to talk about that. That's the other that's pushing into the other extreme. So what are your thoughts around that's the intent as to why there's that push?
I honestly think there would be a lot more acceptance in the world if people weren't so forceful with it. I've had a lot of people comment to me saying like, be who you want to be, but please just don't force it down our throats. And that's their opinion they have on the kids. They're like, we don't mind if people are gay, we don't mind if people are trans, but it's the fact that you're coming at our kids with it and you're coming at us. And it's like, in an ideal world, we should all be able to have whatever sexual orientation we have without needing to declare it and shout it from the rooftops. Like, it shouldn't matter who we're sleeping with. We shouldn't, like, with Pride and stuff, originally, people were fighting for their rights in their gay relationships. They've had that for a while now, and now it's a matter of they're still just look like things haven't changed, and this is where the issue comes. This is why people get frustrated, because they're like, listen, I don't care if you're gay, straight, bi, trans, but why are you making your whole persona about being that? Because they do, some of these LGBTQ people, they seem to have no personality out of their sexual orientation. Like, I had the issue with some people back home in England, some of the lesbians I was friends with, or gay people, every Facebook status was about them being gay, and I was like, look, I know you in person, you've got a really cool personality, why can't you just be you? Why are you just your orientation? You are more than who you sleep with. And that is why people are getting so frustrated, because people aren't just being themselves and enjoying their life. They're trying to force their beliefs on everybody else. But if that person then has other people's beliefs sent back to them, no, you're not accepting, you're a bigot, you're this. No, it works both ways. You can't expect people to accept you if you don't accept them. And another thing I found as well is, I'm open to answering any question about myself regarding being trans. Whereas I found some of these LGBTQ people get so triggered and they tell me I hate myself. I think it's them who hate themselves, because I'm happy with myself. So I'm happy to talk about myself. I'm happy to live in my truth. The people getting triggered, there must be something deep down that they're not happy with, because they'd be happy to openly answer questions too.
Exactly. Any reaction across any side of any spectrum has to do with a complex feeling somebody experiences. It's shame, guilt, embarrassment, fear, right? It's one of those in some capacity. It's something they're feeling on the inside. It comes out as word vomit onto someone else. I genuinely think that a large chunk of folk who are obsessed with saying it as loud as they do, I think that they likely suffer through some sort of sense of rejection, whether it be from something that they experienced for themselves or someone treated them with. And so they get that affirmation, that validation, by applying value, because we're a capitalist society and we've applied value to labels. We all have. Yeah. The entire spectrum has applied value to labels. Mm-hmm. And so the more labels we have, the more value we have. And so on that side of the conversation, it's very romanticized to just keep going after these labels, because that improves my value and it gives me the affirmation and the acceptance that I was looking for. And that feeds into dopamine fixes, right? It makes me feel good. And all right, here's where I'm going. Addiction, right? So when you have something that's reliant on a behavior or a substance and it gives you dopamine fixes, as in makes you feel good, when that system is challenged for yourself, you go into a sense of non-safety. Like that's how our brains work when a dopamine drip is halted. And so that's where the extreme reactivity comes from, and that's where the projection comes from, right? Mm-hmm. And then why is there an addiction? Well, social media. When we are so hyper fixated in a digital world, we condition our brains to think that how we respond online, right? We can swipe things in and out of our lives. We can turn off screens and have God complex. I can control everything in my screen. We apply that to the real world. So again, we're back in this cultural evolution of going into digital media being how we engage with each other. Okay, so knowing all that, what do? You have a predatory medical industry who is taking advantage of compromised people. You have scared parents who are of a generation that maybe are struggling to identify what their kids need. You have social media feeding into that shit with kids can explore, like unopposed explore. In fact, a lot of schools promote behaviors that require being online, and that's going to happen. You know, we still are a wired species that's designed to group with folk like us. And there's peer pressure, particularly with kids. So when you see a large chunk of kids going towards a particular ideology or a conversation, it's going to become a trend, and other kids are going to do that. Yep. All of that is going to make a parent freak the fuck out, which is what's happening, and I totally get it.
Absolutely.
How do we find that balance?
It's all down to the parent. I mean, the parent's going to know their child better than anyone. It's their child, you know. So it's all about the parent not literally taking things for face value and listening to their child's feelings. Like, if your child comes up to you and they're literally like, Mum, Dad, like, I really think that I could be a boy, or I think I'm gay, or just whatever, like, you can't be too nonsense. You've got to be like, let them know you're listening, but at the same time just be firm, but not in a nasty way, you know. Like, your child just needs to know you love them, and also like prepare them. Like with the attack on children in schools right now, be 10 steps ahead of the game. Check what the curriculum is that's being taught, and tell your children the facts first so that they're not being targeted, because there is a trend going on. Like, people want to deny it, but they're wrong by doing that because it's so evident to see. I mean, that girl I mentioned earlier who thought she was trans and changed her mind, it was because 3 of her other friends came out as trans. So there is a peer pressure going on, and I'm not being nasty by saying it. I'm trans myself. You know, like, I get called transphobic, and I think, how do you even come to that conclusion in your head? It's insane. Like, there is a very evident attack going on children, and they are being made to see it trending. And it doesn't help that you go into all these stores and there's pride t-shirts everywhere, because then it shows something they want to be a part of. Oh, this looks really exciting and fun. This looks great. Look at this beautiful rainbow. Oh, you know, like, kids are easily influenced by things, and if they're seeing, like, they're on the mannequins, you go into Target, straight in the doorway, pride, it's going to be a trend, and the people who can't see it, they need to pay closer attention, because it is happening.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, marketing, predatory marketing, whole other avenue, right? So where I've kind of landed in this conversation with, like, a kid is struggling with this conversation, they're questioning, what does that look like? I genuinely think that social transition is reasonable to support, right? Let a kid explore how they want to express. It'll build emotional resilience regardless. You know, at the end of the day, hormones or not, there's going to be things that you aren't going to pass with. And when I've had parents ask me to talk to their kids about questioning, which I 100% only do if the parents are with me and they don't like the conversation I have. I tell the kids, I go, listen, I think that you need to understand what it's like being trans in today's world. Let's talk about the ugly. The ugly
Yeah.
is people think you're a pedo. The ugly is people think you're crazy. The ugly is that regardless of whatever hormones or whatever safe spaces you have, there's going to be unsafe spaces where people are going to hurt you emotionally and physically. And if you can't handle if you can't handle pronouns right now, you're really not going to handle what adults call you. You know, and a lot of kids struggle with that, and parents are like, "Why would you scare my kid out of it?" I'm not scaring them. I'm giving them
Telling them
the
facts.
reality,
Uh-huh.
right? Because what ends up
Absolutely.
happening is a bunch of kids will do these extreme things and find that the world still doesn't accept them the way that their safe spaces do. And then they end up going into depression cycles. They go up into extreme activism. They go into these things that don't help because they didn't solve the actual problem, which was
Yeah.
self-acceptance, self-love, self-worth.
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing as well. Like we've recently had that girl called Chloe speak out about how her parents allowed her to transition at 13, and then she realised she was actually a girl all along, and she tried to detransition, and now she's infertile. She has a deep voice permanently. Her body doesn't work like it used to. She has trouble using the bathroom. She is going to resent her parents forever. This is why it's so important, like you said, let them express themselves, because they can always change their mind, but they can't go back after that surgery. And the thing about D-trans, like, they need to be taken seriously. They do, because these things do happen, and it's happening a lot more than ever at the moment. A lot of people are detransitioning, but the horrible reality is of that as well is you never look how you did before.
Ever.
You never go back fully how you were before, like, especially when you're a female who's gone to male and then female again. You're always going to have a deep voice. Unless you have electrolysis, you're going to keep growing facial hair. You're going to have all of these issues, and it changes your face shape. Like, I actually think the changes from female to male are a lot harsher than the other way round, because of the fact you get, your face goes more square. You get, like, my hands got a little bit bigger. I've still got tiny hands, but they did get a bit bigger. Like, my whole body changed. My muscle mass changed. Women have hips. When you start testosterone, it moves to your abdomen, because that's where men carry that kind of weight, Reversal, horror story. You're always going to look like a trans man, even if you want to be a woman again. You're going to actually end up looking like a male to female. That is the horrible reality, and people don't talk about this enough. They talk about D-trans like, oh, I'm back how I was. No, that is not true. It is irreversible. No matter how much you want to go back to being the gender you were, you will never be fully the gender you were.
There will be scars, right? So if I was
Yes.
to detransition, I went off hormones, right? Which that was in
Yeah.
itself a wild ride. But I grew breasts, and so if I was to ever just detransition all the way, I'm gonna have scars. That's it. End of story. So I'm going to have a issue there, looking in the mirror no matter what. You're gonna have your issues as well, too, right?
Yeah.
No one
It's-
talks about that. No one talks about it,
It's such a
honestly.
big deal, and they're making out like it's not. They're romanticizing this whole transition thing. Like, you can be whatever you want to be. They're not saying the horror stories that can literally come with it. It isn't smooth sailing. There are complications, and it never ends. I mean, I have to take testosterone for the rest of my life. It's
Which
not
is
a
gonna
matter
cause
of once you've
issues.
gone. Yes. Yes, I mean, it increases your rate of having a heart attack by ×3. I have adult acne. I never had acne in school. I used to get the odd spot in my fringe line, because that's normal when you've got longer hair, but I never had spots. And now I get insecure because I'm nearly 31 and I break out in terrible acne after my testosterone shots. It's embarrassing to be an adult and get that, And that's not even all of it. There is the other things too. I told you, the mood swings and everything else. It's being glamorized, but it does have its complications, and they shouldn't be ignored.
And how a lot of doctors treat, the hormone shifts is additional medication, right? So, oh, you're not feeling good. Well, let's try this, and then let's try this, and let's try this, right? And it becomes a cycle. I personally think this conversation belongs in going after, in my opinion, trans rights are mental health rights. a ethical mental health reform.
Yes.
And it's not transphobic to have people question things. I think that we need to have a lot more trauma awareness and trauma focus, because that's a hard fucking truth. And we need to get to the insurance companies.
Well, questions are important as well for acceptance. Like, all these people shutting down straight people and that who have genuine questions, they're not helping the acceptance there. In fact, they're repulsing people, because it's like, why won't you educate us? Like, we should all be able to be comfortable in our skin, no matter who we are, to be able to answer these kind of questions. The fact that people are so shut off from it is kind of sus, and it says a lot about them as a human being. Like, for acceptance to grow, we need to be open to questions and not shove things down people's throats that aren't asking for it.
Well, and I have had a lot of very intimate conversations with people who hated trans folk, because trans folk are walking around calling them transphobic, right? Yeah. So I created a space where I can answer questions, and I've changed a lot of hearts around it. Do they believe in it? No. Are they done shaming like the entire ideology around it? No. They have a compassion, knowing that it's some sort of mental health issue that they're struggling with. And that little bit of compassion sparks so much, right? And these left spaces that just immediately shame anybody who is questioning anything, or detransitioners are invalidating my experience. That's narcissism. End. Yeah. Period. Right? I really struggle with this ideology that, shaming people out of the conversation is literally not going to solve any problems.
No, it's not. It's not. And people need to start realizing that, because I don't think they are.
Well, they get that dopamine fix. They get that high absolutely. From like, oh, look, I fucking fought the bigot. Like, okay.
The internet is a problem, because, the internet, especially nowadays, like, we're living in a society where cancel culture has become normal, and it's praised. Bullying someone, outright bullying them, is, you're so brave. No. Since when was it ever okay to be I can't stand bullies. I was bullied all throughout school. There's nothing I despise more than a bully. And the fact, it actually breaks my heart to know that we're living in a society where people love it. People love arguing. They love saying horrible things to each other. Like, what happened to love? Why can't people just be nice to each other? Like people, there's this horrible saying as well, it's easier to be horrible than nice. No, it's not. It's not. Like, I'm sure everyone watching this has like got in a debate with someone online before, and I don't know about you guys, but every single time I have responded to a hate comment or something, I've felt crap the rest of the day, because I've lowered myself to that low vibration. Like, it's real, like energy exchange. Like, love each other, people. Stop being so nasty. Like, that's why the world's going to trash, because everyone's so hateful. And the thing about labels as well, labels are an excuse for division again, because the more you label yourself and you put yourself in these different categories, you're forgetting even more that we are all one. And the longer we take to all unite, the worse things are going to get.
And, a couple months ago, this is where I really started questioning things for me, was someone asked me, what does a woman's brain feel like? Because you've heard that with trans people. I have a man's brain. I have a woman's brain. What the fuck does that mean? How would you know if you've never lived that experience? And then
you wouldn't. It's make-believe.
And when you start answering that question, what ends up happening is those answers are all negative gender stereotypes. To feel like a woman is insert all these things here, but then women exist who don't have those traits, right? So what? They're not women, right? And it becomes this just illogical loop of dialogue.
It's definitely an ignorant thing to say, because unless you are a biological male or female, you do not know what goes on in their heads. It's like, right. I present myself as male, I'm a trans man, but my wife tells me I give off gay guy energy. Do you know what I mean? Because obviously a part of me is going to be feminine, because I was born a female. I'm hardly going to be this, there's going to be some kind of femininity in me, because it's my truth. I lived so many years as a woman. Like, even though I may have identified as a man or been boyish, I still was biologically a female. I had female hormones in me, so I may come across effeminate sometimes. So people who think they have the exact brain of the opposite gender, they got their head in the clouds, because unless you fully are born that, you're never going to fully have that.
And
Biology should not be ignored.
Exactly. And what I think is that when trans people really, okay, so passing is doing all of these things, right? I almost think that trans people are reinforcing those negative gender stereotypes by saying that, I feel this way, and so I'm going to do all of these things to look this way, and clearly this means that I'm this because of those things. And it's putting up walls that people have been trying for years to take down.
It's living a lie. You're not being authentic.
No, and I have a lot of like education workshops I do around this stuff, and like I was writing an LGBTQ spectrum one, and I was like, what's the difference between gender identity and gender expression? And like my brain literally shut off, because I'm like, holy shit, is that what it is? Is gender identity actually just gender expression? Because identity is a psychological sense of self. And so if we're just honest with that, for one fucking second, medical transition goes out the window. My gender expression is masculine and feminine. My biological sex is male or female. So for me, I identify either as a trans woman, if that's really what you want to see me as, or identify as a feminine man. And I am fine with both of those truths. What I am not is a woman.
Yeah, this is why it's really disturbing as well, because the schools are now teaching that gender is a social construct. That is a very dangerous way to put it, because that is going to make children ignore basic biology.
Yeah.
And I find it crazy that so many trans people struggle to accept basic biology, because they lived through it. They were born either one gender or the other, and then they chose to make that decision to change. And it's like, why are you now teaching the children who don't know any better that male and female doesn't exist, and that there can be 120 billion genders? Like, wrong. Like, regardless of how you identify, biology always goes back to, you're born with either a penis or a vagina. You are a male or a female. You get intersex people, you get some hermaphrodites, but basic biology exists, and people should not ignore it. Wait, I thought you were a trans man. I am.
They might be talking to me. A lot of people think I'm like a butch lesbian, which is flattering. Flattering, absolutely flattering. Thank you.
Thanks.
Like, I did it.
I've had people tell me I'm not trans.
I have had too. I've had a lot of people who are like, I thought you were a woman this whole time. I'm like, well, thank you. Wow.
I've had people say to me, you're a biological male, you're not trans, and I'm like, I've dreamed of that my whole life. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's just, wow. You know, it's just funny, because it's like, who are you? Like, why would I tell you I was trans if I wasn't? Like, it's not something fun. It comes with a lot of, like, you know, like, why would you say that if you weren't? I find it so funny. But yeah, it does happen. You're not trans. Look at you.
So I've pushed back on people who go, gender is a construct. Okay, everything's a fucking construct. Like, it's a social contract. That's how it works. But the majority of the people dictate the social contract. So if, like, a small minority says the social contract says it's going to be this now, and the majority goes, no. Like, that, sorry. Like, that's just a reality, right? Which is why I hate pushing pronouns on things. Like, I'm fine with however you see me. I don't give a shit no more.
Yeah, same.
And I have met gender abolitionists. Like, I moved to North Georgia like a year and a half, 2 years ago, and there's a group of gender abolitionists here, and they're like, gender's a construct, down with the patriarchy. When I say I'm scared of those people, I am terrified of those people.
Yeah. I'm scared of the people as well. Like, I had someone tell me, like, it's not just to do with the gender, it's to do with other stuff too. Someone told me 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. That's a Western ideology. Yeah, exactly. It just leaves you speechless, doesn't it? I was literally sat there like, this world is messed up, help.
You know, some people's kids, that's all I can say. it's such a hard place, and I think social media just conditions people to really believe what comes out of their mouth.
Yeah,
Um,
it has.
you and I are both really passionate around the grooming conversation.
Absolutely.
It's a really dangerous place. A lot of people have asked me recently, like, what do we do about it? What do we do about what's happening? And I'm still working on how to answer that in the articulate way I like to answer things. But if you were to start somewhere, where would you start? Like, realistically, you're going to make a change today. Where would you start making that change to start going after these folk, other than speaking up? Because speaking up only increases awareness. What do you think accountability
Honestly,
looks like?
I'd like to suggest being able to talk to them directly, but the problem is these people are so closed off to any view other than their own, so it's really hard to get to them without literally speaking up. I think even presenting them with facts, like I'm sure you've tried it as well. No, that's not right. Even when it's written there, like from a doctor's perspective or something, where it's like evidence. Nope. I honestly think, and I know it sounds really sucky, but the way this world is, it's a kind of, sorry for my language, but it's a fuck around and find out situation these days. I feel like these people have to learn the hard way because they're so closed off to anything other than what's going on in their head. The cognitive dissonance in the world right now is on a level I've never seen before, on so many things.
And I think it's that cultural evolution. I have a really dark way to have this conversation that I don't do it on lives. I'm going to back off. I'm going to back off. But I think we're hitting this pinnacle of our culture where we're going to find out that not everyone's going to get to the same place
Yeah.
and do very well in life. And it's a really sad reality. And
It
a lot of
is.
people ask me, like, what the fuck are we going to do? And it's like, focus on as little of a space as you can, and if enough people focus on their nearby close spaces, that'll help, right?
Absolutely.
We can't undo what's been done. You can't turn the clock backwards. The reality is that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of trans kids now, and so for people
Yeah.
to go, we can't talk about trans stuff at all. No, if you don't help your kids understand that there are types of people who exist, there's going to be issues with emotional resilience around those people. And I'm not telling you what to do. I believe in setting my kids up for success, and it's okay to acknowledge that they exist. And you can do that without conditioning them to think about
Yes.
things. You can do that without conditioning them to believe that questioning your gender is what you should be doing, right? Um, it's I think the solution is focus small, start at the schools, start at
Definitely.
challenging what the hell teachers are teaching. And a
Yes.
lot of schools are giving pushback on it, and you're called like a horrible fucking monster for questioning it. Pull kids
It's
out,
bad.
and I know a lot of people call me out for saying homeschool because it's a privileged elitist ideology. It's really not. Like, learn about homeschooling before you throw that under the bus. Is it easy? No. If you truly care about your children and you are worried that schools are a lost cause, like, there's a reality there. Um, Join school boards.
Definitely.
I'm not about burning and banning books, right? That's something that I want to make real clear. But I am about books with boundaries. So
Yes.
a lot of these books that promote sex at a younger age, there's a lot of young adult books that have very, very exciting scenes in it that even make me blush. Those should have restrictions on them in the sense that a
Yes.
parent should approve it, right? Understand what your kids are looking at, what they're going through, what their social circles are. It does start with the parents, and it starts with very involved parents. And there's a difference between seeking to understand to be inclusive and seeking to understand whether your child is getting everything they need from you as a parent.
Definitely.
And I challenge conservatives a little bit here, where it's like parental rights are the most important. Those parents can raise their kids how they want to, right? And again, I go back to the calling it child abuse is a problem. But I think that there is a middle ground where if we can have these conversations and seek to understand more, there will be less of a drive for kids to go to this in the first place. So we need to normalize conversations about the negatives of transition. There are some things that it helps from a mental health standpoint in the short term, but in the long
Yes.
term, there simply aren't enough studies that are unbiased to justify it. And I think it's okay to have those conversations honestly, right? You can do it without
Yeah.
shame. You can do it without labels. Just be honest.
Yes, because you do get quite a few trans people who transition in order to improve their mental health, but then they find it didn't go exactly how they wanted it to, and it makes it worse. And this is
Right.
another thing that doesn't get spoken about. It's so romanticized in a sense where, do this, your life will be so much better, but that's not always the case, and more times than people would think. You know, it's not a rare thing that happens. There are people who have a lot of regret, and lately, the amount of videos I see on TikTok of people that have detransitioned, it's more than I've ever seen,
It is a
because
really
of
high
these
number.
people rushing into these choices now, where it's been so ramped up and it's become a trend. People aren't thinking straight anymore. They're going straight for it, and then they're realizing it was a bad idea.
And parents who are just trying to be that space, I think that there's going to be a lot of struggle around that resentment. And
Yes,
I hope that there is a better mental health industry at that point to support them, because they're not going to get it from the people that they shut the fuck out of the conversation.
no, definitely not, definitely not.
And that saddens my heart. I genuinely do
It's
love
sad.
all kinds of people, and I can
Me too.
empathize with just about every situation. But as soon as you shut out an entire side of the conversation because you are emotionally conflicted, I'm sorry, like, you're losing grace, man. Like,
Absolutely,
it's hard.
it is. It is, and more needs to be said about it, because it's not realistic right now the way it's being pushed at all. And it really does sadden me, because the other thing as well, like, for genuine trans people, like, who have like struggled so hard to get where they are, it dismisses their story as well, because there's so many cases now of people who aren't genuinely like it, and they're just confused. So it really dampens the situation for people who really are trapped in the wrong body, because they're as well going to look like they're in this trend.
Exactly. Just like when there's too much of everything, just like when the word racist was thrown around so much that no one treats it with respect. So then real racists are like, just like, no one looks at them because it's been used so
Absolutely.
much. That's why I struggle with the word groomer. And I'm part of the same group you are, the Gays Against Groomers. But like, when everything under the sun is labeled grooming because it's gay related, that's going to allow groomers to hide more, like, easily.
Yes.
And people need to really acknowledge that and really start using terminology and definitions and seeking to
Yeah.
understand how to use those definitions appropriately. Because the reality is, and I genuinely believe this from the support groups that I've ran, from the intimate conversations I've had with thousands of people, myself, the work I've done, I think 3/4 of the population are sexually assaulted as kids. That's a hard truth.
It's sad, but
Right. And so when we don't hold value to groomer the way that it really should be, it allows them to continue down the path they're going. So we you and I are on the same page. This was a lovely conversation.
it's
Like,
been
everyone's
great.
super into it.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Like,
We need to do
you're
this
like,
again, like, because this is important. I saw
yeah,
some comments saying that this conversation, like, I'd love to do this again. Also,
absolutely.
I'm new to TikTok, but I see I've got some coins here. What does that mean? Thank you for them, whatever they are.
It's like Dave and Buster's money. It translates to something. It's like $1.
So sweet.
Uh,
Thank you. You're so sweet. I didn't even know. I saw them coming up, and I was like, "What does this mean?"
Yeah, like, and like, sometimes you get like unicorns and like dogs shaking their asses and shit. I don't know what they mean. I just know that people get excited about it. Uh, but yeah, no, once you're building a reasonably good following, having these conversations, you get a mix of people. You've got your followers that will be highly supportive around these conversations, and you get random people who are just trying to cause shit. It's up to
I
you
love
how you
that
want to do
comment.
that.
You get a
Which
dollar,
one?
and TikTok gets $10.
100%. Like, they get
I
ninety
love that.
percent of the
That's
money.
brilliant.
It's terrible.
Sounds
It's
about right.
terrible. Like, I had 1,000 coins once. I'm like, oh, sweet. Oh, it's like $2. That's cool.
Don't spend it all at once.
In this economy, um, Absolutely, yeah. No, we'll have more conversations like this. Maybe we'll make this a more routine thing so people can look forward to it.
Yeah,
I'd love
definitely.
to invite a couple of mental health people who can help
Yeah.
talk through some of those logistics that we don't know about. And I have a couple in mind too, so maybe we'll think about that as well. But
You
this was
should
fun.
interview. I spoke to a lady yesterday. She's called the Truthful Therapist. Fantastic account she has. Get her on here because she was speaking about the seriousness of this indoctrination, and I actually admire her because, like we were talking about earlier, some therapists are paid to do things the other way. So it's nice to see someone speaking against the grain. And she was actually removed from TikTok for making a video about why some pronouns like can be dangerous, she made actual sense. She wasn't being like nasty with it, she biased or anything. She was being very logical, and TikTok pulled her down, deleted her whole account. We
TikTok,
know they
man.
deleted mine too, like they deleted mine for saying that I was trans and against child surgery. So what do we expect?
I'm gonna flex this until I'm proven wrong. My account is a pristine non-violation account.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you've done so well. How did you manage that?
honestly, I don't have the conversation around shame, and I genuinely think that's what a lot of it is. But shame is also necessary to make impact. But that's just my style. I'm a Libra. I can't help it. I'm a people pleasing, middle of the road type of person. But it is really hard to have these conversations. That's why I throw this stuff on YouTube because they don't actively
Right.
mess with lives. Like someone may report something, throw it on YouTube. Who cares? And I think and I am starting to hold some of these conversations outside of social media, and then throw it on YouTube, and then throw clips of that elsewhere. So, big tech is a problem. I work in cybersecurity. I work in IT. I understand how
Nice.
this works. Is bullshit, but it's reality. And so, how do we do it? But yeah, we'll keep in touch, and we'll do another one of
Definitely.
these. Everyone's requesting it. You're a badass. Keep
So are
being
you.
keep being Mr. Cool Guy, like all over TikTok, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I
And
didn't
I'm glad that you're
expect it.
speaking up.
I didn't expect it. It's definitely been a step out of my comfort zone, but the kids are more important. Like, I don't care about my anxiety anymore. Like, we need to protect these children because they can't do it themselves.
Yeah, I was like
They don't
really in the
understand.
middle, like for this whole time, and then I started seeing, more and more people leaning towards this danger shit, and I'm just like, I do have to pick a side, but I can pick a side and still keep the
Yeah.
door open. But I definitely have picked the side of just like, I don't want kids to go through what I did. I went through some shit, and it fucked me up, and it needs to be talked about.
Can I just shout out
So
my wife, guys? Hey Judith Rose is my wife, so give her a little follow if you're not following her
yeah,
already.
you need to go like
She keeps me
stitch
sane.
her.
She's very good to me. You see, I when I speak sometimes because of my anxiety, I get a bit. So when it comes to making my videos, I turn around to her. I'm like, right, I want to make a video about this. These are my thoughts, and I rant to her, and then she goes, "Aha!" and she helps me put the video together. she helps me
Look
not
at
get.
you.
She helps me not get too in my feelings because it's hard not to with some of this stuff. Like it is hard not to get emotional with it. So yeah, Jude helps me stay logical and get the message out without getting too. Her account is Hey Judith Rose. She's in the chat right now watching. She's got green hair.
Instant follow,
There she
y'all.
is.
Instant follow.
Yeah.
Watch, she's gonna blow up now, just like you did, and y'all are gonna be like this cute couple all over TikTok. I see you. I
She's
see
already
you.
got a huge account because in 2020 she flipped from being a liberal and she ended up on Trump War Room and everything. So we actually met because I was a truther on Instagram and I saw her TikTok blow off, and I think I had like 20,000 followers on my old account, and I was like, I need to interview this girl, and we ended up falling in love, and now I live in America. It happened quite fast.
Oh, that should be its own story that you need.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
don't, I want to tell you what to do. I'm just saying people have a soft spot
Yeah.
for converting liberals over to the right side.
you know. But yeah,
All right, my dear. Well, this was lovely, and I
definitely.
appreciate it.
Appreciate you. It's great talking to you.
Absolutely.
Talk soon, okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Have a good
guys.
night.
Love you all. Appreciate you. Bye bye.
Bye. Well, that was fun, y'all. I'm going to give it a little bit of a pause so everything comes through so I can, like, put this on YouTube correctly. But this was a wonderful conversation. Look at all those hearts. All right, y'all. I'll be back Saturday night to play around with my regular lives. So, everyone, wonderful night.